Hello, everybody. Riku will be here in a second. The two of us are running late because, fortunately, we have full-time jobs. I'm sure most of you do too and know how that feels. So, yeah, we're both running late. Hope you can hear me nicely and loud and clearly. Riku will be on in the next 5 minutes or so. In the meantime, yeah, let's just go through some news. What we'll be talking about on today's show really is looks like Anthony Joshua is going to be joining or re-signing with Sky Sports. Looks like Anthony Joshua isn't going to be signing with Dazn long term. So, I don't know. I think we might talk about that. Might talk about what that means for Matchroom, what that means for Dazn, what that means for Eddie Hearn. It's kind of funny, isn't it? Because Dazn claim that they've got, Matchroom claim they've got some kind of a lifetime contract or a lifetime agreement with Anthony Joshua. Having said that, like I said before, it looks like the agreement they have means that they'll be able to be involved in the actual promotion of his fights, but they won't be promoted on Matchroom's channel of choice, which is Dazn. So that's the reason why we are bringing Riku in to discuss this. And as I say that, the man himself is in the building. There you go, Riku. Both late today. Normally,
yeah. Well, here we are anyway, so that's the main thing. It's like a late ring entrance where
I can hear you. I know your sound is absolutely fine. Let me just turn my speakers on. That would help so I can actually hear you. Yeah. I know everybody else can hear you, but I can't hear you. Ultra running on Black Man time as per effing usual. Righty-ho. Right, the story on the screen. I know you can hear me, Riku. I can't hear what you're saying. No, I can hear you. Cool. 52 in the chat. Please hit the like. Please hit the subscribe. All right, Riku, you're the man. You're the businessman on this channel. Like, you're Mr. Business when it comes to it. You're like our resident Financial Times reader. I gave that a go this morning, reading the Financial Times. The rise in interest rates. I have to say, when you haven't passed GCSE maths and then you attempt to read the Financial Times, it is quite a rather enlightening experience. So I must brush up on my terms. Go on, Riku.
Well, it's meant to be the Financial Times. You're meant to be able to read it if you're an intelligent 12-year-old, if I understood correctly. So maybe it says something about your mental age, but let's leave it at that.
All right, Riku, I'm going to let you yap on about this. You can see the story in everybody's favorite news source, The Sun. So we know this is 100% legit because The Sun would never, ever print any bullshit. We know that. But staying put, Anthony Joshua set to snub Dazn and stay with Sky Sports in a new TV deal that would include the Alexander Usyk rematch. Just before I let you blabber on, Riku, I will say this quickly. What this means, if this comes off, is the following. Dillian Whyte, biggest fight of his career, not on Dazn, but he's a matchroom fighter. Or officially he's a free agent, but you know, it is what it is. Dillian Whyte, biggest fight of his career, not shown on Dazn. Anthony Joshua, biggest fight of his career, possibly not shown on Dazn either. Carry on, Riku.
I think when Team Joshua look at this contract, there's a few parts to this. So we've seen the rumors, I'm not sure whether it's been announced yet, that Ben Whittaker's signing a 7-figure deal with Sky Sports. Quite a few of the 258 guys are at Sky Sports now. And I think in general, one of the things that Joshua cares about, not only the purse sizes, so maybe Dazn can compete with purse sizes, but he wants exposure. He wants to be seen as a star on Sky Sports. He wants to be the guy that gets advertising revenues and other things, commercials and everything else off the back of being front and center of Sky Sports promotions. Well, Sky Sports promotions in terms of the adverts they run and everything else. So they're not just looking at the money in terms of purses. They're looking at that in terms of what's gonna drive his career earnings up, and being seen by millions of people on Sky Sports on a daily basis is a lot more valuable than being on Dazn. I saw last weekend they said Taylor Serrano, which was a big female fight and seemed like a big event in New York, globally 1.5 million viewers. So even if Joshua was on Dazn pay-per-view, the challenge it poses is they wouldn't have as many viewers as his events on Sky would have, but also Sky wouldn't be advertising it. You wouldn't get it on your Sky Sports app. You wouldn't get it on lots of other things. So for the last however many fights Joshua has left in his career, it makes sense for his long-term monetary position to be there at Sky Sports. If you were in his position, would you rather go after loss to Alexander Usyk to fight on Dazn, an app that not many people know of, that hasn't really taken off in the UK, or would you just stay on Sky, ink another 4 or 5 fight deal, and then end your career there?
Well, I was going to try and get something up on the screen, but I think my screen's gone tits up there. But actually, what I was about to say was I was going to actually slightly disagree with you there, Riku. I think he's much better off with the promotion on Dazn. Look at this. Look, how about getting your face on a Pizza Patron token here? Look, Canelo versus Saunders. There you go. If you buy it on Dazn, you get free pizza from Pizza Patron. I imagine if they stick AJ's face on one of these tokens, I'd imagine they'd be drawing a shit ton of money, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, I could imagine that. Maybe he does a Papa John's deal or something like that. But
hold on a minute. Hold on. Is Pizza Patron a Whyte-owned business? Because if it is, maybe that's why you can't partner AJ with it.
Yeah, I'm sure Papa John's definitely is. I'm not sure whether there's any black-owned pizza shops, but we'll see.
That's probably why AJ Simon. That's probably why AJ Simon's Sky. Carry on, Riku. While I sort out my screen. Carry on.
No, I mean, if DAZN are going to be launching this pay-per-view as they've spoken about, and there's been lots of rumors and leaks, essentially, you are weighing up whether you want to go on DAZN pay-per-view, which isn't as big as Sky pay-per-view, and we don't even know how the technology works. So is it as good as Sky? You don't get that cross-promotion versus do you go on Sky pay-per-view, which we know is an established platform and just a lot bigger in the UK. If you're thinking about it from a kudos perspective, would you rather be fighting on DAZN's grainy pay-per-view on Sky HD crisp pay-per-view? What do you think?
I'm eating myself. I mean, what do you think? Because I don't want to give my opinion. I'm gonna let you give yours. Because if I give my opinion, I'll get called a hater. Because you know my opinions in it. You know what I think. What do you think it means going forward then for Matchroom and Dazn? They've yet to get Anthony Joshua, as far as I'm aware. They haven't had a single Anthony Joshua fight shown on DAZN UK. They certainly haven't been able to monetize it on DAZN pay-per-view, right? So I'm trying to think here. Dillian Whyte, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, a lot of people are assuming, could be incorrect, but a lot of people are assuming that he's going to end up with Sky. Anthony Joshua's not fighting on DAZN as a platform at the minute. We know they've had a few problems with obtaining new rights that are going to bring new subscribers in. AAA obviously failed to buy BT Sport, no Champions League rights, no Premier League rights as it stands. It won't be for at least the next 3 years.
as well, right?
What are we thinking? I'm looking at that stable, Riku. Again, like I said, people will hate on me and say, oh, just a hater. I'm looking at that Matchroom stable. I'm looking at the amount of stars they can run on DAZN pay-per-view. And unless you want to run DAZN pay-per-view with Conor Benn, yeah, it's looking bleak, Riku. What do you think? Do you think that's a fair statement there, or what do you think?
No, I completely agree. And I think the other thing is it's a bit similar. We're in that position where DAZN were when they entered the US.
I don't know if Riku's muted himself. No, he doesn't.
Can you hear me?
Can everybody hear Riku? So just to say, carry on, Riku. Sorry, I can't hear you for some reason, but it might
just be hear me?
Carry on, Riku. As long as everybody else can hear you, it's fine.
Well, let's see. Let's see if others can hear me. Can you hear me?
Okay, we can hear Riku. Keep talking, Riku. For some reason, it's me.
Everybody else can hear you. I was going to say, I think so they're in the same trajectory as DAZN US, where they started big fanfare, big events, trying to make something that people, people subscribe, and it hasn't really taken off. And I think they were blindsided by how quickly Boxer were able to sign fighters, put on good events, and rival them. And I think Eddie Hearn forgot that he wasn't the star of the show. It was the boxers. And without that Sky platform, he was never going to be as successful, at least in the short term.
This fight hasn't been announced yet, Riku. Is this a mistake?
No, he hasn't.
Jesus, I mean, what's your feeling? I mean, it's just every week it seems like there's 2 more weeks to go. Every week it's next week. Every week it's a couple of weeks. It's Saudi. It's the 23rd of July. It's this. It's that. I mean, look. I mean, this has been dragging on for nearly like 9 months.
Yeah, I mean, 23rd of July. I thought it was June, wasn't it? When they were set, was it July 23rd or June?
I could have gone. I thought it was July, but the guys in the chat will tell us.
It might be. Yeah, it might be. Yeah, no, I had the 25th of June down as a potential date, but it might be 23rd of July. But if you think about 23rd of July, you still have 10 weeks to promote it, 10, 12 weeks, 10, 11 weeks. So you've got time. July is quite a strange time to do boxing, as is June, height of summer. We don't usually get that many events that time of year. So usually get them in May and then back in August. So but it might be to do with when they can actually book the Spurs Stadium and football and everything else.
Right. Okay. Okie dokie. Right. So, my thoughts are: look, it's looking bad. It's not looking too good if they can't sign Anthony Joshua. I mean, look, I remember when Dazn moved into the UK and Journalist of the Year, Mr. Ebony Bridges, is Muhammad Ali, aka Gareth A. Davis, was asked about Dazn and Dazn's presence in the UK market. And I think it was one of the few bits of decent journalism that IFL, possibly Coogan, actually it was Umar, has ever done in his entire life. And he said, but hold on a minute, can Dazn boxing ever be a success in the UK without Anthony Joshua? And Gareth A. Davis said it's just unthinkable. He said they're going to sign. He said they're going to sign Anthony Joshua. They're going to have Anthony Joshua. Like the thought of them moving into this market and doing what they're doing without having some kind of agreement or not having some kind of assurance of Anthony Joshua is just unheard of. He said they will have Anthony Joshua. It's 2 fights in and they haven't had Anthony Joshua. I think he will end up on DAZN, Riku. I think if he gets beaten by Alexander Usyk, yeah, and he has to come back and he has to maybe go down the notch and fight, not an elite world-class level opponent. Maybe he has to step down a little level and fight somebody world level, fringe world level. Maybe, like I said before, that kind of fight he can end up on DAZN for. What do you think? If he loses?
I mean, look, he'll have a contract, and that contract will stipulate things whether he wins or loses. What the interesting thing would be Eddie having to work with Sky. What that would mean. That's going to be the interesting bit. I think Joshua's made a decision to sign with Sky, with winning and losing being in mind. But like any fighter, he's not going to think he's going to lose. But if he loses, that's already priced in the contract somehow. So he might have to accept less money for future fights, or there might be other things that they're thinking about. I think for Sky to sign Joshua, that makes them equally good, if not a lot better, if not at least somewhat better than at the DAZN stable. Would you agree? If you look at that stable, Sky versus the DAZN, if you have Joshua fighting on Sky.
Yeah, well, I think Sky could be in a position where they've got Anthony Joshua. They could be in a position where they've got Dillian Whyte. I don't know about what you think. We'll talk about Shields and Marshall, if that could be a draw. I reckon that could actually be a potential draw for them, Not saying it's going to do a million buys or anything, but I just think there's a bit of a buzz about that fight. I think I've always thought, for me, there's more of a buzz, about Shields and Marshall than there is about Taylor and Serrano. And that's just been it for me. Like, the thing about Taylor and Serrano was it ended up being a very, very good fight to watch. But, you look at the build up, the two of them sitting there bumping each other's pussies and talking about how much they respect each other. Whereas Shields and Marshall is just pure trash talk. And I think we all know that bit of trash talk kind of sells a bit. So I think Shields and Marshall, they do well. I'm not too up on my amateur boxing, even though I'm in the gym this Saturday. So I should be. Ben Whittaker signed for 7 figures. I think he's the Olympian that pretty much everybody wanted. Obviously, you've got Lord Huey Fury, who's probably the overall king. That's it. The king of heavyweights. I mean, like I said before, if they can snab AJ, Dillian, I think they still need a few others. But again, you can see, Riku, what Sky are doing. They're nabbing the future. And Matchroom used to have Dabs. And I believe, Riku, I don't know if you ever heard, did you hear that Matchroom had some kind of first refusal on all of these guys from Team GB? Did you ever hear that?
I did hear that. Yeah. That was when McCracken was cozy with Matchroom.
Right. They had first refusal.
Also, if you think about it, at that point, Matchroom had more or less a monopoly. So if we're looking at 2012, right, the class of 2012, Frank was on Box Nation.
Yeah.
Box Nation weren't doing that well. As an Olympian, the place to sign was Matchroom, right? 2018, 2016, again, Matchroom was the only place he'd really want to sign. 2020 Olympics, which turned into 2021 Olympics. Now that there's more options, be it BT, Sky, or DAZN, he actually feels like Olympians are choosing what the best option for them was. But I don't think there's ever been a position since Eddie's been in boxing and we'd had an Olympic cycle where it's not just the guaranteed things that Olympians end up at Matchroom.
Do you know, somebody asked me the other day, who do you think the number one promoter is in the UK right now? And I said, it's Eddie Hearn, right? In an offline conversation, I say, you probably still have to say it's Eddie Hearn. I think, like I said, in terms of pure promoting, which is hyping fighters, getting people to tune in, bums on seats kind of guy, I still think Eddie Hearn is probably far and away the best promoter in the UK in terms of being a promoter in the rawest sense of the word. I think he's the best I've ever seen since Don King. Arguably even better than Don King, to be honest. But it is what it is. But he's certainly in that for me. Don King, Eddie Hearn, two greatest salesmen I've ever seen in my life. But as an all-round promoter, I'm not sure. How would you guys say if someone says to me, right, who's the best promoter right now? I'll lean to Eddie Hearn in the purest sense of the word. But go on.
Yeah, I mean, boxing's complex, isn't it? Because it doesn't matter how good your promoter is if you don't have a good manager. If you look at the law of the fighters that Eddie's had, guys like Lee Purdy, guys like Brian Rose, guys like others. So it's not like not everybody speaks highly of Eddie after they leave Eddie, right? I mean, Dave Allen's probably still ringing Eddie. Whereas on the other hand, you have guys like Al Heyman that all the boxers that work well, Heyman, nobody has a bad word to say about them. And also some of the matchmaking for Eddie Hearn and Matchroom has been dreadful over the years. I would still say as a promoter and getting the event going, Eddie's definitely the best. We saw what Taylor Serrano and other things. I don't think any other UK promoter could have pulled that off. And to Eddie's credit, he's had some decent events in the US. He's managed to convince Canelo to sign with him and Dazn. So I genuinely think he's a good promoter, but he also does get in his own way.
It's interesting. I'm actually thinking I'm about to do a poll. Davies and Dave says, better promoter Eddie Hills, best matchmaker deal maker Frank. You know what the funny thing is, Riku, and I'll throw this in though. You know, we said about Eddie and you said about Eddie and Taylor and Serrano and all this and that. The ironic thing is, and this is my opinion, and if I'm wrong about this, please correct me. 155 in the chat. The likes are absolutely fucking atrocious.
Jake Paul was behind that.
Yeah, well, you go. Exactly what I'm going to say. 155.
No, I think that's true. But I would also say Eddie was the one that had the foresight to get into women's boxing earlier than some of the other promoters. And also, after slagging off all the YouTube boxers and saying it's terrible, he was the one that started putting them on shows. And he's the one that's cozied up to Jake Paul to essentially half run the show with him. So I think we also need to give him credit for spotting an opportunity and grifting that opportunity.
Oh well, yeah. All right, I'll give him a credit for that. I mean, my point was going to be that I think he has a problem making big fights. I don't think his previous attempt at making Taylor and Serrano nearly ended up in legal action against Serrano. Remember that whole debacle with Serrano the first time around, and it nearly ended up with them taking some form of illegal action against Amanda Serrano. So when he had it all to himself the first time, he absolutely completely cocked up the fight until Jake Paul got involved. And then the fight happened. Obviously, like I said before, he made a fantastic bid for Whyte versus Tyson Fury. Wasn't able to get that one over the line. Frank Warren was able to get that over the line. Kambosos and Devin Haney. Obviously, he had to be cut out of the picture altogether in order for that was the only way that fight was going to happen is if they cut this guy out. So, like I said before, I don't know, man. I'm not sure about his ability to make big fights, but I'm going to put a poll up in the chat, and then we'll move on to our next topic. If you want to talk about
Dean Whyte as an option, your man, Dean Whyte.
Jesus fucking Dean Whyte as a fucking option.
Is he going to be an option? We need to.
Yeah, God, I'll make Dean Whyte an option.
Eddie, Ben Shalom, and Dean Whyte.
Hold on. Okay, let me do this. All right, you need to talk then while I'm doing this. Then think of something to talk about. Talk about Taylor and Serrano if you want, and its impact on women's boxing.
I thought Taylor and Serrano was an excellent fight to watch as a neutral. I think that's what female boxing really should be. It should be about slugging, entertainment. You should have less of this collective matchmaking in the male fights. The event looked brilliant, and I heard anybody that went to that event were all saying that it was one of the better events they've ever been to in boxing. So credit on that. But I do agree with Ultra that Savannah Marshall against Clarissa Shields is a bigger fight because there's more history behind it. There's the whole only woman that Clarissa Shields has lost to. They are bigger, they are heavier weight classes. So I think that's a bigger fight, definitely. But I thought it was good to see that in female boxing. You actually saw high-class boxing with some slugging and everything else. Whereas if you look at something like Ebony Bridges against Shannon Courtney, that was just two relative novices just slapping each other.
I said I did a prediction before the Taylor versus Serrano fight. I predicted Katie Taylor to win the fight by wide UD. I was actually surprised it was close as it was. I actually predicted Katie Taylor wide UD. So I got that wrong to an extent. I thought she'd piss walk it, actually. The reason I thought she'd piss walk it is 2-minute rounds. And my prediction was that Katie Taylor would win by wide unanimous decision, but the entire conversation post-fight would be about the need for 3-minute rounds in boxing. Because I think people that are still, promoting and talking about women's boxing and predicting fights don't understand the difference between a 2-minute round and a 3-minute round. Yeah. Where do you stand on that? I mean, for me, like I said, a 2-minute is like a different fucking sport. Listen, if you want to bring 2-minute rounds into boxing, I may get a license if you want to start bringing in 2-minute rounds. 2-minute rounds is a completely different sport. And anyone who's ever done it will tell you the same thing. It's completely different to doing 3-minute rounds, almost a different sport. So I think, like I said before, there's talks of Shields and Marshall being held up. I would like to see it get held up. I'd like to see that fight over 3-minute rounds. It's a damn shame that we're getting all these big women's fights happening and they're happening in 2-minute rounds, Me and Shevin did a little bit of maths, Riku, and we worked it out. 10 times 2 minutes, right, is around 20 minutes. So in terms of men's boxing, you're looking at under 7 rounds. Under 7 rounds. Yeah?
Yeah.
7 3-minute. Yeah? 7. Yeah.
It's also like 50% increase per round that men fight more. So you're fighting 50% more each round.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, when you think about that, the fact that 2 women can fight for an undisputed a ring magazine, a this and a that, they're fighting for all these undisputed and unified titles. And basically what it boils down to when you compare it to men's boxing is actually, a fucking 6 3/4 rounder. They need to do something about that now. Because for me, like I said before, I'm not convinced about that. No, give me your thoughts on that, Riku, if you've got any, and I'll read some out from the chat as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll be interested to know. Somebody said there's health reasons.
There are, and I think
there are. I'll be interested to know does anybody know in the chat, and make sure you like and subscribe. Does anybody know what it is in the UFC? Do they fight the same length as male fighters, female fighters? And also, because I think the main thing for me with female boxing is you have to think about it 2 ways. One is that you want to make it as entertaining as a product as possible. At the moment, we don't have that, because what we have is we have a massive golfing class between the top 3 fighters in each division and then the rest of the division. Even if you look at some of these women that Shannon Courtney and others have been fighting against, they basically fight against dinner ladies for world title eliminators. So in order to make it competitive, you have to think about that in the rounds, because the worst thing you'd want to see is someone like Shannon Courtney going 10 3-minute rounds, out of her breath, slugging off the 5 rounds. I mean, nobody wants to see that, right? So it's also part of it's about the entertainment factor and whether that's possible with limited talent pool that currently exists in female boxing.
Listen, I agree with that. And the thing about you said about Shannon Courtney and fighting dinner ladies, it's actually 100% true. Like, and it's difficult for me to say, but I know that for a fact. You know, I know that for a fact. And I know other people, males, have been in gyms and also sparred with certain females that are very, very highly ranked, shall we say. Not household names. We're not talking like Shields. We're not talking Marshall. We know like Shields can spar men. We know Marshall can hang with the men. We know that Katie Taylor can hang with them. I'm not saying they can go full-blooded, fucking 8-10 ounce gloves, but do you know what I mean? But these girls, Taylors, your Serranos, your Marshalls, your Shields, etc., yeah? You're right. The elite, your Michaela Myers, you can put them in the ring, yeah, with a certain level of male fighter for a spar, and they won't disgrace themselves. But there are women I know for a fact that are in rankings or have gotten opportunities or have been on TV. And I promise you, like, you'd be shocked. You'd be shocked if you knew the level that these girls were actually at. Like, it really is shocking. Sorry.
And we have a lot of women that are decent boxers. I won't name any in the small hall circuits. That are 7 and 8-0. That have turned from people that have joined from the army, started boxing 3 years ago, or keep fitters. Even someone like Hannah Rankin, right? She won a world title or fringe. Did you win the WBO or IBO? I met
You're
Hannah.
right, WBA. Carry on.
Yeah, I met Hannah. She's lovely, very nice lady. But she only took up boxing maybe 4 or 5 years before she turned pro, and she became a full-time pro. So part of it is you need that investment in women's boxing in order for the boxing to become more competitive, and then you can extend the rounds, because otherwise I'm not going to be watching a lot of these guys' journeys, particularly because female boxers don't have the same knockout power. So that means that we'd be watching more longer fights that are less entertaining, and we go back to the dark ages of not having any female boxing.
Oh, this is interesting. So let me get this up. I was going to ask you. So Richard says, I've sparred a female amateur at a relatively well-known gym. She never ended up turning pro, but yeah, she was decent. Fantastic. I'm not going to talk about myself there because I'll get hunted down. Riku, if Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano was a 12-round, 3-minute fight, which in my opinion it should have been, what do you think would have happened in that fight?
I think Serrano would have stopped her.
100%. 100%.
I think Teddy Atlas said an interesting point, 100%. Which is Serrano. Many people have probably seen the video of her on the scales, and she's 2 pounds heavier the day after the fight. Serrano is smaller, but she's a lot stronger than Katie Taylor. So she's just naturally stronger. Her punches were harder. So she's just naturally a lot stronger fighter. Whereas I don't think personally Katie Taylor has transitioned yet to the pro style, but you can do that in female boxing because the golfing class between women like Katie Taylor that have been pros their entire lives with sponsorship money, and a lot of their opponents is huge. Like, remember Delphine Persoon? She was a police officer in Belgium, taking time off work to fight against Katie Taylor at Madison Square Garden.
End of story.
Yeah, I mean, Team GB women, same. Lauren Price, Karis Artingstorff, Sandy Ryan, who I met. She's very nice as a person. So, they are pros, and they've been pros since they were 16, 17, 18, and joining that GB setup. So they are technically very good. They are professionals, whereas in a lot of other countries, female boxing is so small and niche, and the best athletes end up going to the UFC, that it's not a fair representation. It's not fair in female boxing having longer rounds, and in general, the standard is just terrible because you might have 3 or 4 good fighters in each weight class.
All right, I think we'll move on. I mean, I think it was a great fight. Go on.
If female boxing was about high performance athletes, and you had the best around the world, and the funding was there around the world, similar to that you have relatively male boxing, do you think someone like Shannon Courtney will be winning a world title?
Do you know what? I actually think Shannon Courtney's got genuine ability. You know,
He
like
does. But do you
I
think
genuinely think I'm not sure about a world title, but she is. I have to say, of all the female boxers, I would actually say she has got genuine ability. Now, somebody like Ebony Bridges, I think that's a completely different fucking conversation. And I mean, if you look at fucking her, she was made to look like Julia Cesar Chavez in her last fight because of them 2-minute rounds, where she was able to fight you know, she's looking like a one-woman wrecking machine in that fight, looking like the return of Ricardo Mayorga in a boxing ring, looking at Ebony Bridges in her last fight, you know? And for me, like I said before, what will happen in female boxing is I predict they will bring in 3-minute rounds. And when they do, it's going to turn female boxing completely and utterly on its head. You know, Katie Taylor would still be a good fighter over 3 rounds, but would not, in my opinion, be, and I'll get called a hater, but I'm going to tell you how it is, would not be the pound for pound #1 fighter if 3-minute rounds came into play.
No,
that whole style that Katie Taylor does, that amateurish style, somebody in the chat mentioned the shoe shining and the stuff that she gets away with and stuff, not gets away with, it's a style. Sorry, but that kind of amateur style, I call it the female Amir Khan. That kind of amateurish style isn't going to work over 3-minute rounds, especially over 3-12s. Eventually, that kind of style, you'll get ground down in fights. And like I said, I think Katie Taylor's a fantastic fighter. I just feel Soon probably would have got her out of there, and I think Serrano would have got her out of there over 3-12s. And that's the only thing I'm quite reluctant. Yeah, when people start saying, "Well, Katie Taylor's the greatest female of all time," and etc., my message to all the fans out there is, I don't think you've seen anything yet in women's boxing. I think if you start seeing 3-minute rounds, and then if we start graduating to 12-3s, I think you're going to see a completely different class of fighter. You're going to see a completely different class of fighter. And you're going to see the eradication of this more amateur style of boxing that you see from Katie Taylor, where you're just jumping in behind a 4-5 punch combination, trying to rack up points without necessarily trying to hurt fighters. It's going to become a lot less of a sprint, and it's going to favor a completely different style of fighter. And you're going to see new fighters come through that are going to dominate, in my opinion. Go on, Riku, give your opinion on that, and then we'll...
No, I agree. And I think people that say Katie Taylor is the greatest female boxer of all time, I mean, look, there's Lucia Rijeka, the Dutch fighter. She was amazing back in the day. I think she's like 14-0, 12 knockouts. You had Catty Brown, even Jane Couch was a very good fighter. You know, there's lots of female fighters that have paved the way for Katie Taylor and others. And they were fighting back in the day when female fighting was in the dark ages, a lot smaller, but very tough women. And my argument always of female boxing is the best female fighters are now in the UFC because they can make a lot more money. Whether it be, what's it called, Heather Hardy and, you know, Holly Holm and all these other ones, they've all left female boxing. Yeah, that's
and I tell you, I think the one thing the UFC have got right, they haven't got paying their fighters right, but the one thing they have got right is, I think the female mixed martial arts is just leagues and leagues above anything that we see in female boxing. Leagues and leagues above.
Yeah, and it's global as well. It's not just from a few nations that fund female boxing. That's the other big thing.
All right, let's have a look at this poll. Dean Whyte's hanging on in there in 3rd place. 34% of you, only 91 votes, 170 people in the chat. Please hit the like button if you would like to. I don't really care if you subscribe or not at this point, to be honest. I'm going on a long holiday from this channel at this point, so feel free to not subscribe if you don't want to. But if you'd like to hit the like button for the YouTube algorithm, please feel free to do so. Only 43 likes in here. Pretty tragic, but it is what it is. The best promoter in boxing is closing in. It's Eddie Hearn's on 33%. Frank Warren's on 32%. Listen, I've been called a hater. What have I been called? I've been called every name under the sun, and I've been given almost every threat under the sun for, what was I saying? 5-6 years ago, I was saying Frank Warren, pound for pound, is still a better promoter than Eddie Hearn in terms of, if you had to build a stable from scratch, build a stable from scratch, get a TV deal, and keep bringing the stars up tomorrow through, as well as building current stars. I think Frank Warren, that's my opinion, is the best in British boxing. And my opinion is, like I said, Eddie Hearn's probably the best pure promoter. But I think, look, you've seen what Frank Warren's done on a less budget on BT versus what Eddie's done on Dazn. And for me, like I said before, the writing's clearly on the wall there. If you look at, like I said before, the budget that Frank Warren had on Box Nation was still able to bring through Billy Joe Saunders to a world title. You see what happened to Billy Joe Saunders when he went to Matchroom? He fought on a YouTuber's undercard Then he fought a 40-year-old Martin Murray. Then he was fed to Canelo Alvarez and wiped out. You managed to bring Liam Smith a world title shot on a Box Nation budget. And Liam Smith then went on to actually defend said title against Canelo in Cinco de Mayo. Brought through Anthony Yard, brought through Daniel Dubois, and brought through numerous other fighters. That Anthony Yard's basically one fight away from fighting for an undisputed title. In the same period of time, Joshua Buatsi, Olympic gold medalist, hasn't even fought for a European. Let that sink in. Joshua Buatsi hasn't even fought for a European. Anthony Yard is one fight away from fighting for the undisputed light heavyweight championship of the world. I just think, to be honest, like I said before, in terms of pure sales, Eddie's the best at pure sales and the best actual promoter all day. But for me, you'd be fucking crazy to turn around and give this guy any kind of money like Dazn did and say, build me a stable, because it's now been 4 or 5 years or 3-4 years since he turned up in America and said that Showtime was going to be out of business. Yeah. And that, he was going to put Showtime out of business and that Dazn was the next big thing, game change and everything. And everything that he touched, unfortunately, I'll get hated for this, but every time everything he's touched pretty much over there, other than a couple of things, it's pretty much turned to shit, End of pay-per-view, that went to shit. Showtime is still in business. We're able to sign Canelo Alvarez. Congratulations to Matchroom from that, but weren't really able to build any big stars. Nikita Arbiabi, gone missing. Raymond Ford, who I think is a quality fighter, gone missing. What's his boy? Anthony Sims Jr., gone missing, etc., etc. Sorry, Riku, carry on.
When you mention Buatsi, I always say this. He turned pro 3 months later than Shakur Stevenson. He's 5 years older. Look at their career paths and trajectories. Both Olympic bronze medalists.
I've never seen anything like it. That is whoever's been managing Joshua Buatsi's career, and I think Buatsi's some of that problem is himself, right? Some of that problem is Joshua Buatsi himself. It's not already heard on Matchroom, but nevertheless, yeah. I think whoever's managed his career is a disgrace. I mean, the other day we were showing tweets from Spencer Fearon comparing Joshua Buatsi to Evander Holyfield. The man hasn't even, and this is how highly hyped up he was. And it's like 2-3 years later, the man still hasn't even fought for a European. So that's my opinion. Do you want to yap on about Whyte and Fury yet? Because we haven't even got you on about that, have we?
No.
Feel free to give your thoughts on that if you want to.
You know what? Initially, when I watched the fight the first time, I thought actually Whyte did really well. But watching it again, I thought he was very lackluster, flat. It didn't feel like he was. The occasion got to him, and also Fury was just too good. But I didn't think Fury he didn't fight that well. Fury didn't look. His feet looked quite flat compared to usual. I didn't think it was a great performance from Fury either. But Whyte was
really
successful, yeah.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. I watched it back actually. At first, I didn't think much of it, but I watched it back. I thought Fury's pretty bang on actually. I think it's his best. I mean, obviously the opposition isn't Deontay Wilder, but nevertheless, in a fight that was supposed to be an extremely dangerous fight, I think his feet actually looked really good. Actually, I actually went back and had a look at that. Thought he looked very quick. Thought he looked quick on his feet. Didn't get hit with a punch. Didn't get hit with a meaningful punch all fight. I think he took a handful of double jabs. And I know Dillian Whyte's not much of a, we've all known that Dillian Whyte is not the fighter that his fanboys, be telling you is. Mainly the fanboys that be talking about this arbitration. Where is this arbitration? Can somebody please ask these people who claim to know Dillian Whyte, where is the arbitration? Where is it, Riku? Have you seen this magical arbitration? Where is it?
No, but wasn't there meant to be an extra money for the purse? That was told to us many times that we're going to have to give Whyte more money. The greatest lawyer ever. So, yeah.
Yeah, and he's been paid. Riku, he's been paid. He was paid last Monday. He's been paid.
Yeah, but he wasn't meant to get paid, was it?
No, he wasn't. I thought he wasn't. Yeah, but if anybody knows where you can find Dillian Whyte's arbitration, I'm thinking of setting up a fucking hotline for this. Actually, I'm going to set up a hotline number in a minute. If anybody has any information, I'm going to put it on Crime Watch. If anybody's got any information about this fucking imaginary arbitration that people have been yapping on about, please contact me and Riku. I'll get up the hotline now. Carry on, Riku.
Should we set up a GoFundMe page to fund the arbitration, to give Jeff Benz some money?
Yeah, let's set up a GoFundMe. I'm going to have Umar Johnson run that. Hold on. Here you go. Right, here's the phone line. If you know any information about this mystery Dillian Whyte arbitrator. Dillian can't talk because the arbitrator told him that if he says something, then it means that Dillian's going to get in trouble. So that's the reason why Dillian can't do the press conference, because they got arbitration. Yeah? So there you go. Look, you see it on the screen, Riku, here. 1-800, please call in. 1-800 arbitration. All right? If you'd like to, please call in. 1-800 arbitration, yeah? And we can finally get to the bottom of this and find out. All I want is a fucking case number. That's all I'm asking for. And a date of the hearing would be nice. If anybody can find me, what court is this arbitration in? And we're talking about the arbitration for the purse split. We're not talking about the existing arbitration case, yeah, for Dillian Whyte being made full champion, yeah? We're talking about an arbitration case, RE, the 80-20 purse split assigned by the WBC. If anybody has a case number or a date of a hearing, okay, or what court it's in, that would be fantastic. Please call in 1-800 arbitration and we will be giving you a free reward. If you want, I'll even send you a used condom in the post. Riku, please carry on.
Yeah, I mean, look, the arbitration's as magical as the B sample. There's a lot of missing parts to. I mean, you know what? If you had Dillian Whyte's autobiography in 5 years' time, you'd have blank pages, a chapter on the arbitration, no information. You'd have another chapter in the B sample, no information, just missing pages.
It's unbelievable, isn't it? Like, and you know what? It's unbelievable the stuff that this guy comes out with. And I just don't know of any other fighter that would have survived the amount of stories that have come out. Like that B sample, the way that whole case was handled, that would have been enough to pretty much ruin the reputation of most fighters. But somehow he managed to get out. I have no idea how he managed to slip out of that B sample thing. But fair play to him. And then his fucking magical arbitration. Jack Shaw saying it's on the 31st of February. Okay, we'll keep an eye on that date for sure. Richard on Twitter is also saying, where's the scan for Whyte shoulder injury? And you know what it is, Riku? We sat on here. Do you remember when Otto Warling got shafted out of £30,000? Otto Warling done spent £30,000 on a training camp, yeah, to go and train for a Dillian Whyte fight. And then Dillian done pulled out on the last week, and these Muppets were saying, oh, it's really clever from Dillian. It's super clever from Dillian because, you know, anyway, it doesn't matter. He needs to go straight into the feud fight. The number one excuse that Eddie Hearn came up with for why Dillian Whyte got smashed to bits is because of, what did he say? He said it was down to lack of preparation. He said Dillian had ring rust. He hadn't been in the ring. You hadn't been in the ring because you guys were arsing around with that damn Otto Warling fight. Carry on, Riku.
Yeah, and also, I mean, Fury hadn't been in the ring for ages either, had he?
No.
So why, if... This is my problem with excuses in boxing. If somebody wins, we never hear any. If somebody loses, there's always an explanation. I wish fighters before the fight would be transparent about how their camps have gone, if they have any injuries, if ring rust will affect them, and then we can discuss that actually after the fight. But after the fight, if a fighter loses, I don't want to hear any excuses. And that's what you need to respect Joshua for. He doesn't give you any excuses, does he?
Hey? AJ? He gives loads out, Anthony Joshua. What did he turn around? He said that the reason why Andy Ruiz hit him, he said it was a punch from the fucking gods.
No, but what I mean is he doesn't give excuses that, you know, ring rust, camp didn't go well, I had an injury.
And then he blamed his whole fucking team. Hold on a minute. Anthony Joshua blamed his entire fucking team. His entire team got put on the
you're
chopping
right.
block.
You're right about that point. You're right about that point.
Jesus Christ, yeah, we did a whole show on that. A lucky punch from the gods. AJ's one of the fucking worst. There's AJ and Dillian talking there on the screen, both probably to be seen on the Sky Sports box office pay-per-view near you. What do you think is next, Riku? I'll be honest, I thought Tyson Fury, like I said, listen, I'm not saying a fight with Whyte's going to be the same as a fight with AJ or Usyk. AJ and Usyk are levels above Dillian Whyte. But I just think, for me personally, Fury boxed really well. Not many fighters can get in the ring with Dillian Whyte and get out completely unscathed, you know. Joseph Parker's not an elite fighter, but Joseph Parker got knocked down pretty heavily by Dillian Whyte. Anthony Joshua nearly got knocked down pretty heavily by Dillian Whyte.
If there was one more round, Whyte would have been out of there.
Yeah, I agree with that. But Tyson Fury's made it look, I don't think any fighter has been in with Whyte and made it look that easy with Whyte ever. Like, he didn't land anything meaningful in the entire fight. If you had to stay for number 10, Riku, you could stay for number 10. That's fine.
We talk about Joyce against Joe.
Yes, let's talk about.
Which was announced in a peculiar way.
let's talk about Frank Warren announcing fights that ain't even been signed yet, and it's now 2 weeks since he's fucking announced the fight, or a week and a half since that, and there's still no fight. Classic Frank at his best, isn't it?
But did you see the announcement how that came out? The Joyce against Parker fight.
But I thought Joyce dropped it by mistake on TalkSport. Am I wrong?
No, there was some sponsor sponsored Joe Parker.
What, Empire Pro Tape?
Yeah, that was the one.
Yeah, but Joe Joyce already told everybody at the Whyte and Fury fight it was going to be May 2nd, then it's 2nd of July anyway.
Yeah, that's true as well. But
I don't think they genuinely. I don't think Empire Pro Tape broke that. I saw a few people on Twitter saying they did, but I think when Joe Joyce spoke to TalkSport and TalkSport caught him, I think it was Jim Whyte. Joe Joyce done opened his mouth, and you know what Joe Joyce is like with his mouth, and he said, "Yeah, I think he dropped it that it was 2nd of July." So maybe that's where they've got it from. Carry on.
No, I mean I found that one quite funny and interesting.
Well, what I find interesting is there's still no fucking signature. And Frank's been saying all sorts. He's been saying he's going to sign Joseph Parker because obviously he's got an option on Parker. And there's still nothing, Listen, when that fight doesn't happen and it hasn't been announced yet, yeah? When that fight does not happen, let me tell you, anybody wants to come in here and slag off Frank Warren, you're absolutely welcome. I ain't defending him because he's done this so many times. He's done this, isn't he, Riku? So many times he announced fights before they've happened. Carry on.
No, that's one of the things that really annoys me about boxing is this. We have to wait for months for fights that we know are probably going to happen to be announced. And then we get disappointed that fights that we think are going to happen never get announced. At least in UFC and other things, just announce the bloody fights. I mean, nobody needs to see loads of tweets and speculations on dates when a fight might happen. It's the same with this Joshua against Usyk thing. Just announce the fight. I mean, come on. We don't need to wait 9 months for that fight to be announced, right?
Announcements about announcements about announcements. It is what it is. Yeah. If you'd like to ask Riku a question in the chat right now, just can ask anything randomly about boxing. I suppose you can ask. You can just go ahead and ask away. Hasnain says, do you think we will see Deontay Wilder fight again?
I think he'll fight again, on a PBC card. Maybe against Hellenius or something like that. I think the timing is right for him to come back. I would probably favor him against Usyk. So, yeah, I think he'll fight again.
Let me tell you, if Tyson Fury was to retire, right, and really give up that WBC, he'd definitely come out of retirement.
Yeah.
Because he's going to fight for it. He's going to fight for it. Ask Riku, do you think Coogan was banned from America? And if that was the case, would IFL still be allowed to operate in America? Riku, if you want to talk about your favorite subject, aka Daniel Kinahan, I'm going to let you talk about that. I like to say, you guys know, innit? I'm on the MTK Kinahan payroll till the death.
I thought you were the Frank Warren payroll. I mean, look, there's a lot of people have done some great work and some great chatting about it. So I think the story is that allegedly Coogan wasn't allowed to board a flight to the US, similar to Matthew Macklin. That was reported in the Times. So IFL do not operate in America. They are British business listed on Companies House. They operate in the the UK. They are obviously allowed to send staff members to the US, but because of potentially or alleged links, maybe, I don't know. The story goes that Coogan wasn't allowed to go to the US. I don't know whether this is true or not, but essentially, if he flags up on a list of people who are connected to Kinahan allegedly one way or another, then he wouldn't be able to go to the US until this stuff is sorted. So, but anyways, it doesn't have any bearing on IFL because they can send any other journalist there. They're allowed to film content in the US. It's more to do with him being able to travel to the US than it would be for IFL to be in the US, if that makes sense.
Let me ask you a question about this, Ken. This is the worst counter argument in the history of mankind. Yeah. Right? But I'm going to throw this at you. This man, Don King, is this man still a promoter?
Yeah.
Is he still allowed to operate in boxing?
Did he go to prison?
He did.
Yep. So, I mean,
How many? Hold on. That's fine. How many people did he kill?
2 people.
How many people did Daniel Kinahan kill?
I don't know. I mean, that's the answer to it.
Which one's still allowed to be in boxing?
So let me just clarify this point.
Go on, go for
this is more like this is more a technical point. So obviously, you have to have some sort of license to operate in boxing, in theory, right? So if Daniel Kinahan or anybody else wants to become a manager, they have to apply for that license through the board. But when you're an advisor, you sit outside of that board jurisdiction, and boxing allows you to operate in a way where you can advise fighters and not be under any sort of governance. So as a fighter, I can agree that I have a manager on paper that takes no money or takes 5 or 10%, and then I can pay an advisor 5 or 10%. I mean, a lot has been said about this whole Daniel Kinahan thing. But I think fundamentally the important point for me is that if boxing wants to continue to receive government money, if it wants to be on big TV stations and it wants to be seen as a legitimate sport, which helps communities, transforms communities and young people's lives, then I think it's important that it just cleans up its act. And I don't think Daniel Kinahan would have been able to purchase a football club, for instance, or operate in a lot of other sports. But one of the things he could do is operate in boxing. He is obviously on the sanction list from the US, which make him and anybody associated to him, they operating in boxing or moving money more so, very, very difficult.
So after we clean out Kinahan, who are we cleaning out next?
So this isn't about boxing cleaning out anybody. This is about Kinahan being on sanction list and wanted for questioning in Spain, Ireland, by Interpol and others. So this is about the US stopping him and his organizations from moving money from one country to another. It's more about him facing justice rather than anything else. So this is the boxing thing. So I think we need to separate the stuff about boxing and what the law requires.
Right. Okay. Because I just think, from my opinion, I can understand, what you're saying and stuff. Kinahan's on a sanction list. Obviously, like I said before, money laundering, blah, 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 blah. But that's not what's been going on online. What's been going on online is fighters have been getting harassed. Anybody associated with Daniel Kinahan is being harassed. People that have been associated with Daniel Kinahan are having their names dragged through the mud. I've seen Sonny Edwards' name dragged through the mud. Lord knows why Sonny Edwards' name would be dragged through anything. I've seen Tyson Fury's name being dragged through the mud. People are asking Tyson Fury very, very difficult questions, as if Tyson Fury's the one pulling out a 9mm and shooting people, or Tyson Fury's the one doing drug deals. It seems like this is a little bit more than, simply a case of Daniel Kinahan's being sanctioned. And obviously, do you know what I mean? We don't want any sort of money passing through his businesses, or we have to... look into his business dealings, because obviously, we don't want too much dirty money in the sport of boxing, whatever. It's sort of the feeling I'm getting online, isn't that? The feeling I'm getting online is that this is a witch hunt, right? That's the feeling I'm getting online. It seems like it's a plan, it's as much about as much as defaming Daniel Kinahan, it's also about defaming everybody that's associated with Kinahan, wanting to see the end of Pro Bellum, wanting to see the end of anybody who's had any kind of association, wanting to see the fighters that he's helped and worked with become promoterless and not working with anybody. It seems like a lot of people online are actually taking pleasure in seeing good people who have helped people in the sport of boxing lose their jobs, who haven't been involved with in any sort of dodgy dealings with Kinahan. These are people who've just done their jobs in boxing, help fighters. It seems like people online are very, very happy to see these people be out of work or lose their job. It does feel like very much like a bit of a witch hunt.
There's an element of that, of course. It's boxing, right? And probably some of the tweets I posted seem that way. And I don't think it's a case of we should want people in boxing losing their jobs. I think there's 3 aspects to that. One is boxing's control over the boxing media. So during the Whyte Fury press conference, no questions were asked about Daniel Kinahan in relation to the promotion, in relation to his association with Tyson Fury. You can't, in any other sport, if there was a similar situation, say a football club was associated with a Russian oligarch, so Chelsea FC, you can't just stop the journalists from asking them questions about what does their association with Abramovich was sanctioned, what does that mean for the club, you know, how does the club feel about it and so forth. In boxing, we have a habit of doing that. So that's one. So I think people are frustrated by the idea that the boxing media is a mouthpiece for boxing organizations, which it shouldn't be. It should be credibly looking at this. I think the other thing is everybody's known that this has been going on for a long time. It's no surprise. The Irish media have been reporting it. Everybody's known the stories. Everybody's read about it online. But now everybody's a bit braver because it's all out there and it's okay to do it. And I think the third thing for me is this idea that a lot of these athletes, so Sonny Edwards and others, they did feel like they could get a rile and reaction from fans by posting photos with Kinahan. I think Sonny Edwards has that one where he's got the T-shirt, no drugs, no drugs, no boxing, whatever that T-shirt was. And that was just there to troll people, right? So a lot of fighters have sort of sports washed or whitewashed Kinahan's image through boxing, and they've taken a big pleasure of doing that. I think it's unfortunate for the people like Leeson and others that have been working for MTK and others that they are having to lose their jobs. But also, if you work for a company, an organization, well, you work for a company with close links to Kinahan, that was going to happen at some point, probably. But let's hope they find new jobs and everybody that's good for boxing stays within the sport. But I also think nobody's blameless here. And what I mean by that is the fans have been happy to back MTK, knowing this has happened. The media has been silent about it. I mean, IFL is basically an MTK mouthpiece. And everybody in boxing, from the boxing promoters that have dealt with Kinahan to the TV execs and TV networks, they're all to blame for this mess. And the one that suffers most is boxing as a sport, because why would any sponsor or anybody that wants to invest in sports touch boxing after this for a long time? And that's going to trickle down to the amateur clubs and everything else in boxing. And at the end of the day, that's going to trickle down to the boxers.
Let me just quickly say a few points, and then I'll let you have the final say on this one. I mean, again, I find it boxing's been involved with dodgy people. How long are dodgy people, mobsters, gangsters, crooked fights, people having dodgy things in their drinks, this kind of stuff's been going on in boxing since boxing began. So that's not a valid point, right? I'll get onto that in a second. But my point really is, what I'm trying to get my head around is why now? Boxing's had dodgy stuff in it for 50, 60 years. We've had people, like I said before, the promoter here, he's allowed to promote fights, was a pimp who killed 2 people. Nobody's protesting against the. Let me just finish my point, and you can go. It's fine. But I just want to make that clear though. I find it ironic that Don King is still allowed in the sport of boxing. Pimp killed 2 people. I don't care if he did 4 years in prison or not. Pimp who killed 4 people, but people are going after Daniel Kinahan. But the real point I wanted to make was on the boxing media, right? This is more of an actual point, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, the boxing media have been like, it's bad for the boxing media to not allow them to ask questions of Tyson Fury and blah, blah, blah about Kinahan and NTK. The reason why is because the media are fucking scum and boxing media are fucking scum. And I tell you why. If Tyson Fury had turned around and Tyson Fury had said, yeah, Daniel Kinahan's just a friend of mine, do you know what would have happened the next day? Would have been a bunch of headlines saying Tyson Fury is friends with frigging suspected drug dealer and kidnapper and all this kind of things about Kinahan. I mean, we saw the last time Tyson Fury was sort of involved in the media in regards to UCAD and how the media treated him, how the media tried to twist his words and do all sorts. So that's probably the reason why they didn't want to talk to the boxing media about Kinahan. it's not just that they've got something to hide, which they have. It's to do with the fact that boxing media is trash. People have an agenda, and people are going to place that agenda no matter what. And all it would take is someone like Tyson Fury to say, you know what, Kinahan's not my advisor anymore, but he's a good friend of mine. And the headlines would be Tyson Fury's friends with this guy, and Tyson Fury's friends with, drug dealer Kinahan. And how can he be friends with such a disgusting person? Fury claims to be a man of God, but he's got drug dealers as a friend. And then the same idiots would then twist that up. The same Muppets would twist that up, and they put that on Fury as well. And I think that's the reason why people don't want to say anything. So I understand, what you're saying. I think you've got a great point. So you're probably right about everything you're saying, about the boxing media and things like that. But the boxing media, all they've shown for me, to be honest, is that they're untrustworthy and that they're trash, to be honest, and that they take things, they don't know anything about nuance, and they take things exclude the boxing media. If you look at channels like IFL TV, obviously Seconds Out, all these channels, they don't specialize in nuance. They specialize in outrage. They specialize in clickbait. So you can't trust these people. You can't fucking sit down and explain to these people about the nuance of being a friend but not an advisor. These people don't get that. They're going to go for clickbait. They're going to go for headlines. And unfortunately, it's going to get a lot of people into trouble.
So
did that make any sense what I just said there, Riku?
No, I get your point, but I think there's a few things. There's one, they should have been asking these questions before.
Right,
two, the other thing is the people that are actually covering this at the moment aren't boxing journalists, they're sports journalists. So we've got the Times have been running a story basically every day around this. And by not asking the questions, you're creating a story by not allowing people to actually ask those questions. There's ways that they can back these answers. And now we've had a big fallout where all these TV companies are coming out and saying, well, we didn't know about his involvement. We're going to have to look at our due diligence. The next time they want to sign a contract with boxing or having to spend money on boxing, do you think they want to get involved? On the Don King and other points, I mean, yeah, we had Blinky Palermo involved in boxing that went to prison for money laundering through boxing. Don King, he's committed horrible crimes and he's gone to prison for them. The thing with Daniel Kinahan, what's different is he hasn't stood trial for the things he's alleged to have done. So we don't know the extent. It might be that his influence in boxing was minimal, which is unlikely. It might be that he had a huge influence in boxing. But in any case, the problem is this isn't a decision made by boxing. This is a decision made by the US government, right? This is a US government thing, so everybody has to play ball. Interpol already after him. This is something that is beyond boxing. This is a story about organized crime in Ireland that has become a global story about a drug cartel.
If Daniel Kinahan was captured by the US government today, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Daniel Kinahan had to serve 2 to 4 years.
Trial, right? He'd go to trial.
Okay. And if Daniel Kinahan had to do 2 to 4 years in prison, yeah?
Yeah.
And came out and did his time, would you be happy for him to return to boxing immediately?
I mean, look, it depends on where he returns and what he does. So I don't think Don.
Let me get speaking. Would you be happy for if Daniel Kinahan went to prison? Let's say he went to prison today and did 2 to 4 years in prison. Would you be happy at the end of that for Daniel Kinahan to come out and continue to advise fighters like Fury?
Yeah, I mean,
continue to advise fighters
why wouldn't I be happy? I mean, look, if people want to advise fighters, if people have checkered records in the past and they want to advise fighters and they want to be involved in sports, I mean, boxing should be somewhere where people can redeem themselves. So I'd have no problems with that. Personally, my problem isn't necessarily fully with Kinahan. I think the problem is more with how boxing approached this issue in the first place by not asking the questions and now taking a bit of a hypocritical stand. And secondly, and everybody from Eddie Hearn to Sky to everybody else washing their hands off this issue, and they all knew what was going on, right? You can't talk about ethics and then say, well, we didn't know that this would happen because.
Well, that's it. So that's what I'm saying. So what are we going to do? Are we just going to target Kinahan, or what about the people who had dealings with Kinahan, knowing full well what Kinahan was? What are we doing?
That should be the line of questioning from the boxing media, right? You should be asking about this constantly. You should be asking Frank Warren about this. You should be asking Bob Arum about this. You should be asking about this stuff. And this is the biggest story in boxing in many, many years. Make no doubts. I mean, the tentacles of this Kinahan advisory businesses reach all corners of boxing, but particularly in the UK, Sky are complicit, BT are complicit, Dazn are complicit, every single promoter in this country is complicit, most managers are complicit. There's not many people that can wash their hands of this and say, I mean, it's got terrible stench, right? It's bad for boxing. There's no two ways about it. I mean, boxing fans.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
The fact that this is bad for boxing, not about this being. We can't care about Kinahan too much because we are, we're based in the UK, no Ireland. But if you care about boxing, then you should care about this issue. They've been bad for boxing and implicating everybody involved in boxing.
You're absolutely right. It's bad for boxing, but you know what's also bad for boxing? What's bad for boxing is fighters failing drug tests.
Yeah,
fighters failing drugs tests is, in my opinion, right? A fighter knowing they failed a fucking drugs test, and then that being held from a fighter, and then getting in the ring and punching that fighter in the head for 12 fucking rounds, knowing that you failed a fucking drugs test. To me, that's far worse than anything Daniel Kinahan has ever done in the sport of boxing.
Yeah, but
to me, there was
can be true at the same time, right? Two things can be true at the same time.
No. But let me smart my point, because there's a point to this, right? That's fine. I'm talking about, my point is going to be about priorities, isn't it? Because a lot of the outrage does seem to be a little bit like inconsistent. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, with all this outrage to Daniel Kinahan, I understand that it's bad for boxing, and I think all your points are fantastic. I think fighters knowing that they failed a drugs test and then getting into the ring with somebody who doesn't know they failed a drugs test and punching them in the head for 12 rounds and potentially fucking killing them, I think that's worse for boxing. I also think what's worse for boxing, personally, is corrupt judging. I think corrupt judging is far worse for boxing. I think, talk about the sport of boxing, the fact that you've got people that are going and betting on fights and people that are betting thousands or hundreds of pounds on fights. And then these judges are coming up with scorecards that are just fucking so ridiculous. They're so fucking ridiculous at times. Some of the betting companies like Bet365 just say, do you know what? Or Paddy Power just say, do you know what? Fuck it. We're going to give you a bet back because, there was obviously, some dodgy judging going on. So even though you really lost the bet, we're going to pay you off. There doesn't seem to be, to me, the same energy towards things in boxing that are far worse. And that's the only point I was trying to make with Don King, really. The fact that, you look at what's going on. You've got pimps in the sport. Pimps who kill people are allowed to be in the sport. You've got fighters in here who are taking performance-enhancing drugs behind other fighters' back, going in the ring, punching them in the fucking head. The promoter knows the promoter even knows, in some cases, the promoter knows they failed a fucking drugs test and lets them get in the ring. Nothing fucking happens. We just carry on. We yap about it for a week and blah, blah, blah. And all this kind of shit goes on. We don't say anything. We let it carry on. But poor Daniel Kinahan, all of a sudden, it's like, it becomes a whole saga. And that's why I get angry about it. Carry on, Riku. I'll mute myself.
I think it's important. Look, there can be lots of things that you don't have to have one thing that's bad for something. You can have lots of things that are bad. We don't need to measure what's worse for boxing, why isn't. I think there's a bit different.
No, I think we do, though, because priorities. We do, because that's how you prioritize.
So
you look at the severity. You look at the severity of something, and you prioritize accordingly. And that's what. And I'm not saying we should not be looking into Daniel Kinahan. I'm not saying that. All I'm trying to say is, I just want to make a point out. It's just the outrage levels. So I'm trying to say, it's just the outrage levels. That's all I'm trying to say. The outrage levels are disproportionate. They're disproportionate.
So I think there's different levels to this. One is all of the things you mentioned are bad for the sport. They're terrible for boxing in general. And I don't think anybody can say Daniel Kinahan, when he was involved in boxing and before the sanctions, was necessarily terrible for the sport. But I think one of the things that you're missing is the focus they puts boxing on. So bad judging and bad scorecards, we've become so accustomed to them in boxing that, it's a story for a week, but it doesn't garner much national media attention. It doesn't stop kids from, parents from sending their kids into boxing. It doesn't stop people, sponsors investing in boxing. But this Daniel Kinahan stuff, the reason why it's so bad for boxing is because of all the implications it has beyond that one event. And that will be long-term implications. So, one fighter losing because of a bad scorecard, that's really bad for their career. It's bad for boxing.
Yeah, but what about the drug testing, Riku? Wait, Riku, what about drugs? What about all these fighters who are drugged up to the moon and the promoters know they're drugged up? They're going into rings and they're fucking punching people in
that's
the
bad.
head, doped up with steroids.
That's bad for the.
Where's the outrage? Where's the outrage for that? Where's the outrage for that?
I mean, look, I've been outraged many times about that, and I've made clear points about why I'm outraged with that. But I think we've got two things here. One is the problem is the attention this puts boxing in, and it's not because of us being outraged on Twitter. It's about national media focus on this issue in relation to boxing, right? And that's the bad thing about this thing. But I don't think we can go into start judging what we need to fix in boxing. Like Kinahan in itself wasn't like on the top of anybody's list of things that we needed to fix in boxing. But because of what's transpired, it's become a huge issue for the sports. If Sky decide they're going to pull out of boxing as a result because it doesn't meet their CSR criteria or whatnot, if BT decide to do that, then nobody needs to worry about the drug cheats and nobody needs to worry about the scoring because we won't have much boxing in this country.
Yeah, and what do you think the odds of that happening? What do you think the odds are of Sky Sports pulling out of boxing out of 10 or BT pulling out of boxing because of Daniel Kinahan? Give me out of 10. What do you think?
So, you know what? I think it's bigger than people think, and I think it's that decision won't sit in the sports teams. That's going to be sitting somewhere in the corporate team. If they feel that for example, if they feel that they haven't done their due diligence and they've been involved in somehow in a scheme where money has gone to Daniel Kinahan and they haven't done their anti-money laundering things, then that decision might come from the head office where they decide, you know what, we're going to have to pay money back, send some money to charity, and as a result, we're not going to be involved in boxing because we don't believe it's a clean business. And that
90,000 people have just turned up to Wembley Stadium to watch Dillian Whyte versus Tyson Fury. You could do 90,000. Hold on, we could do 90,000, 100,000. Anthony Joshua. We're on the verge of getting Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury. Whether Anthony Joshua wins or loses, they're saying that's a $2 million fight, and you're saying that BT and Sky, who would be major players if that fight was going to happen, would pull out of the sport because of Daniel Kinahan.
So this isn't going to be, if they're going to pull out of the sport, it's not an overnight thing. Remember that. It's going to happen over the next 12 to 18 months. There's going to be all sorts of investigations. Fair enough. And there's also going to be, look, they need to figure out if Daniel Kinahan gets caught or brought to justice. They're going to have to figure out how the money is moved, who's had the money. And if some of those links go into, if some of those links end up going into Sky or BT, and as Richard says here, Discovery just bought BT. Discovery is an American company. If they are seen as a part of a money laundering operation, they're just going to have to pull out, aren't they?
Yeah, they pull Probellum because no one gives a fuck about Probellum and they ain't got no fighters on there and no one's got anything to lose out. No one gives a fuck about Sonny Edwards in a fucking 12-rounder versus some guy from fucking Indonesia. That's why Probellum got pulled. When you're talking about Fury, AJ, big pay-per-view fights, $200 million fights, I think it's going to be a slightly different story. Carry on making your point, please.
Yeah, so my point is that this issue is now beyond boxing. It's not just the boxing issue. It's an issue that impacts everybody in the boxing ecosystem, and it impacts in ways that we can't control by the boxing media. As fans, we can't control. Remember, boxing is a small sport for these companies. You know, compared to football, Formula One, other sports, boxing's cheap and it's small. If you need to show some sort of repentance or, you need to show some sort of remorse, maybe not signing a new deal or, having a bit of a hiatus from boxing makes sense. The other thing is we don't have much talent coming through in this country. We're going to be headlining those pay-per-view events. So maybe that's the convenient excuse to get out of boxing at some point. I'm not saying it's a high likelihood it's going to happen. It's quite a small one. But these are the kind of things that are being discussed at board level at the moment.
Mm. All right. Well, I think you've made your point very, very succinctly and very, very well. Like, I can't really counter a lot of what you're saying at all because I think obviously know quite a lot about it more than me. To me, like I said before, the issue in boxing that I think people really need to start having a look at if they really want to clean up the sport. Me personally, if I was involved in the police, I wouldn't be looking at guys like Daniel Kinahan, to be honest. Yeah, he wouldn't be top of my list. Top of my list would be fucking people who were going into the ring, fucking roided up and punching people in the head. And the fucking promoters know they failed a fucking drugs test and don't tell the promoter. And the next minute, we're one bad punch away from a death in the fucking ring. That's what we are. We're one bad punch away from someone dying in a ring. And we had a situation like that happen in the fucking UK. Excuse me, Riku, I'm not swearing at you. I'm just saying in general. We had a situation like that happened in the fucking UK. And this channel was pretty much, this channel and another channel that you're probably a part of as well. And I think maybe one other channel, a channel that's now a podcast on Apple iTunes. There are about 2 or 3 fucking channels in this country that will fucking ask about this fucking B sample. Spencer Fearon himself came on this damn show and I had to ask Spencer Fearon about the fucking B sample. And where's all this stuff gone? For me, like I said before, Daniel Kinahan wouldn't be top of my list, over those people. I'd be asking questions about how are promoters allowing fighters that have allegedly failed drugs tests to get in the ring without the opponent knowing and punching these people in the fucking head. That's what I want to know about. I don't give a fuck about Daniel Kinahan and his dodgy drug money. Drug money's been in boxing for the last fucking 50 and 30 years. Another thing about Kinahan, which I also say is, you tell me about this week if I'm right or wrong, is fighters seem to like Kinahan. Yeah. And I'm not saying what he's doing is right. The fighters seem to like him. He seems to treat the fighters right. You know what? To me, it's a breath of fresh air that we've got somebody in boxing giving these fighters good advice and not trying to rip them off and giving them good advice. I think that's a positive. I'm not saying that Daniel Kinahan shouldn't be sanctioned by authorities or that he shouldn't do time or whatever. But I think that's a positive thing. And it annoys me that you've got so many dirtbags in the sport of boxing. And you've got this one guy who the fighters actually, regardless of what he does outside of boxing, right, how he makes his money, the fighters seem to like him. The fighters seem to appreciate him. Seems to get fighters paid. Seems to get fighters good fights. And this is the guy that we go after. This is the guy that we're now fucking throwing nukes over. Mind you, all these other fucking dickheads, like your man, 2-time pimp Don King, who's fucking stomping people out, stomping people to death on street corners and selling women and robbing fighters for their money, allegedly. Oh, we just fucking roll out the red carpet for these guys. We fucking roll out and let them put the fucking crown on their head on a damn press conference. Riku, I'm giving you the final word. I'm muting myself.
Yeah, I'd say, look, all of the issues you mentioned are massive, massive issues for boxing. I think I'd put them in different buckets. One, the Kinahan situation, that could be the hammer blow that has a detrimental and quick impact on boxing. The poor judging, the drug cheats, the corruption in boxing, that's the one that chips away boxing constantly and will grind boxing to a slow death where we'll be watching YouTubers and UFC, and UFC will take over. So those are 2 different buckets of sort of risk for boxing.
Yeah, all right, Riku, I'm giving you a 10-8 round for that one. Is there anything else you want to cover or any other questions you want to answer or whatnot?
No, well, make sure everybody likes and subscribes, and thank you for running the channel. I've been enjoying the content over the last few weeks, so keep me up, mate.
No worries, Riku, and I appreciate that debate there. All right, so we've got that. No worries, Riku. Take care of yourself. See you later, my man. Bye bye.